So, welcome to all of you to tonight's masterclass. Before I introduce the gorgeous human sitting on top of me, probably on your video screens, I'm going to do a tiny bit of housekeeping. First and foremost, these sessions are recorded. They're recorded for our subscribers who receive free masterclass access with every pouch. So please bear that in mind. I'm always very conscious that we're having broad conversations on evenings like this, but this is a very safe space. So if you want to be anonymous, even the questions you put in the chat, remember that you can toggle between messaging everybody and messaging just Vera and myself. So if you message just Vera and myself, we won't use your name. We'll ask questions on your behalf and honor that anonymity if that's what you prefer. So please know you have that option here this evening. And please also be aware that obviously anything we do bring up and talk about as a result of a question coming into the chat from you will be circulated to the subscriber base of MPOWDER. The other thing to make you aware of today is it's an open session, so it's going to be an open mic conversation. We have collected lots of questions from you this evening. But what we're not able to do tonight is answer any medically related questions that are explicit to you and your health history. It wouldn't be safe for Dr. Martins to do it in this environment. We don't have enough information about you. But if you do have concerns that you do want to pick up following this evening, obviously we have our health concierge team on hand. We'll share details of how to get hold of them. And our role at MPOWDER is always to signpost out to the trusted sources. So if we feel that there's a medical doctor who may be able to help you or a conversation that needs to be had, then we're here to support you for all of that. So those are the main housekeeping bits. The final things for you to be aware of is as attendees this evening, you'll be receiving this as a recording as well. If we run a little bit over, which I have a feeling we may tonight, that means that the recording is coming to you if you do need to drop off after the allotted hour. So without further ado, I will start the session. For those of you that are joining one of these events for the first time, we are MPOWDER. We are a co-invention community that is 5 years old, born out of my own pretty messy menopause journey. And really, we're focused on one core thing, which is helping all of us to stay well, really by making sense of what actually helps. So alongside the formulations we create for you, one of the most important things we do here is facilitate access to the best experts in their field. So you're not left trying to interpret headlines or fads or Instagram posts. We're really about sharing what we do know, but also what we're left, yet to discover. And I think it's true to say that within the metabolic health sphere, the insight and knowledge that we're gaining, even in the last couple of years that I've been sort of intimately involved in it, is really moving at pace. So a lot of the challenge, I think, now is not so much not being able to access stuff because it's not there. It's almost like there's too much, there's too much stuff coming at us humans. So the intention this evening is that we help you break down some of that detail into really measurable, actionable steps. And this topic, particularly of weight, diet, hunger, food, is always top of the wish list when we ask our community what we want to talk about. And I think it's because it's such a frustrating symptom associated with midlife. And we're going to start this evening really looking into the why of weight gain. But before we do, I also just want to acknowledge a few things about weight. And this is something I've observed over the last 5 years, but also the more we work with coaches and multidisciplinary practitioners, both here in the UK and particularly in the US, where a lot of the clinics we're working with are working with females across all levels of their health. And it's the fact that we, as we hit midlife, are not very good at being kind to ourselves. We're not very good at recognizing that one of the exacerbating factors quite often in weight gain is the external stress. And we'll come on to talk about the why. But I really do want this evening to be an open conversation about the why, about the frustrations, about the things we can do. But I really also want us, if we can, to just take a moment and feel a little bit of awe for our bodies and for where we are as humans and for what we do, because you will all be coming into this evening carrying so much. You will have so much figuratively on your plate, and yet we still beat ourselves up because we can't stick to that punitive diet regime that everyone told us was going to work on the 1st of January. And it really is about reframing our relationship with both ourselves and with food that is the route through. And I posted about this yesterday on Instagram because in a way that frustrates me as well. I would love there to be a silver bullet, but the truth is there isn't. But what is beautiful, and this is what I love about conversations with Dr. Martins, is really the brilliance of our biochemistry. So I just want you to try really hard to sort of separate out the frustration that all of us feel with a recognition about how amazing you are as humans. And really, tonight's focus is on nourishment, not punishment, and long-term strategies that genuinely, and we can share the science, will make a difference to where you are today. So without further ado, I'm introducing Dr. Martins. For those of you that have been with MPOWDER for a number of years, you will know that she's the formulator, the brains behind our products. She's also an expert in so many areas. She's our scientific lead at MPOWDER. She's a naturopath, she's a herbalist, she's lifestyle medicine certified. And the doctor in her title comes from her PhD in biology. So we're in very safe hands tonight. And we're also in the hands of a new mum who's just returned. So that's why, for those of you who've only joined MPOWDER in the last year, you may not have seen Vera's face before, but she is back and I am delighted. Welcome, Vera. Lovely to have you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for such a lovely introduction, Rebecca.
It's so gorgeous to have you here.
I felt a very nice, warm welcome. And yeah, it's my first masterclass after I had my baby, so 7 months ago. It's exciting, a little bit scary at the same time. I was telling Rebecca that her baby brain is here. So let's keep that in mind, but hopefully you'll be fine.
Well, yes, and as I said to you, your brain is so huge that even when it's baby brain, it's still more than enough for us to pick this evening. So I'm looking forward to getting started. The other thing just to bear in mind this evening is, because we've had so many questions through, we're going to be sharing with you not just the recording from this evening, but actually a tailored PDF with a lot of the questions that we know you might want to return to in terms of answers, as well as some top tips, some recipes that Dr. Martins has formulated, which really break down how to create indicative plates that have the food groups and the nutritional components that we're going to talk through tonight. So we're going to be talking insight science first, then into practical tips. And if we run out of time, please don't worry, there's going to be a huge amount of information heading your way in the next 48 hours. So I'm going to just dive straight in, Vera. You and I have talked about this evening and how many questions we had into the room. And the one that I wanted to begin with, which I think is at the heart of all of this for us, is when we say as women, nothing works anymore. You know, I'm gaining weight, I have no idea why. What is actually changing in our bodies, and what impact does that have on our metabolic health?
So I always like to start by saying that there is, to some extent, a common denominator, which is called estrogen. So this is one of our main sex hormones. And what happens is that when estrogen declines, it affects several aspects of our health. So in the context of tonight, it does affect our basal metabolism. So it slows down our basal metabolism, meaning that we burn less calories at rest. And then it also affects the way our brain works. So we have estrogen receptors in the brain. So think brain fog. Then our sleep changes. It gets lighter, more disturbed, maybe. And our resilience to stress is also affected. So we become less resilient to stress. All of that is under the estrogen changes umbrella. And then there is also recent research showing that loss of estrogen can modulate our gut, so our gut health. So it can actually change the profile of bacteria in the gut to a pattern that impacts on metabolism, but also on blood sugar balance. So there's quite a lot already just here. And I guess that answers the question why we feel that nothing works anymore.
So just to play that back to you, you've got the estrogen that's impacting basically how many calories we burn when we're at rest. It's impacting our brain. And I guess we'll come on to talk about that in a minute, but the domino effect of what happens when we've got brain fog and the cravings and the need for energy that also come as a result of poor sleep. And then on top of that, you're talking to us about our gut microbiota changing, and that's actually impacting our blood sugar balance. And again, that will impact what we seek out in terms of food choices as well.
Yes, and that those changes in gut health are actually huge, because as we know, our gut is the home of so many aspects of health. So here I mentioned the blood sugar balance in the context of what we're talking tonight, and metabolism, but it can also impact on our brain health. So can be linked to depression, low mood. So,
Mm.
so many aspects that are relevant in the context of menopause. So just
Mm.
gut health on its own, that's sort of what I'm trying to say, it would be impacting.
So much anyway. Yeah,
Yeah.
that we're learning more and more, aren't we? So I think for all of us listening to that tonight, hopefully that gives you a sense of the why, because the reality is our biochemistry is changing fundamentally as we transition through this lifestyle. And so all of those things that we were using to manage our weight, manage our energy levels, are likely to need a reassessment if we find ourselves gathering weight, which brings me on to my next question, because I almost did it there as a little subconscious movement.
Yeah.
The other key thing is, and it's a question every time I sit down around the table with a group of friends, it's like, why is the weight here? Why is it here? What is the body doing? I know enough of working with you, Vera, to know that there'll be something very beautiful about what the body is trying to protect us from. But why do we tend to find that where we store weight changes as we transition through menopause too?
Yes, so that's the other thing. So there are these changes in our metabolism, more likely to accumulate fat, but there is also this typical pattern where that fat is more likely to be around our waist area. This is actually the decline on estrogen that starts that conversation. So that decline in that hormone sends a message, so a signal to the body, which kind of shouts, store energy. And this happens, as I said, typically around the abdomen. So that's where we store energy. This is called visceral fat,
Mm.
which surrounds the internal organs, and is more difficult to lose than the subcutaneous fat. I read recently that that kind of fat becomes what we could call an energy savings account. So I quite like that expression. Your body doesn't want to touch it. Um,
Mm. That's so interesting, isn't it? Lisa's flagging, yeah, it's absolutely that, isn't it? It's that hips and stomach piece. And what you're saying, Vera, is actually the body has had a signal from the brain to store it here because we're actually going to need it. We're going to need that energy because I guess the body is in a state of stress, and the assumption is it's going to need to utilize that fat at a later stage.
Yeah, exactly. Because when the estrogen goes down, the body knows naturally that there will be less energy available. Because,
Mm.
as we just talked about, estrogen helps with energy and with so many other body functions that when it's almost like the body goes into a stage of alert. And this is how it does what it does in terms of storing that kind of fat for worse days to come. But then there are other aspects, other things that change as well during this life stage that further contribute to that pattern around the
Mm.
waist area. So one is we are more likely to be insulin resistant.
Mm.
And that is also known to contribute to belly fat accumulation. So that insulin resistance again sends the body the message to store fat in that area. And then the other one that is very typical is the cortisol, the link with
Mm.
cortisol. We have more chances to be coping less with stress, so that the decreased stress resilience that I mentioned, so more likely to have a disrupted cortisol pattern. And cortisol also directly promotes fat storage in that area.
Because
Then
again, I think the body thinks it's in danger because cortisol is that response to that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then also hunger hormones come into the equation. So changes in leptin and GLP-1, loss of muscle mass, which happens naturally at this life stage. We need to do a bit more work to keep that muscle mass up. And so less muscle mass, you're more likely also to start accumulating belly fat. But I always like to say it sounds like a lot, but in a way, it is reassuring that, and when we know that this is all part of a natural transition and that we're not doing anything wrong.
Mm.
And also, you mentioned this at the beginning, Rebecca, but that this stage when we start to feel there's so much going on and we may feel that our body are failing us, then we can panic and start doing certain things that can
Mm.
be counterproductive. So let's say we may start doing more exercise or eating less. And again, going back to the concept of stress, these are actually interpreted as stress signals by the body. So that can release more cortisol and is feeding into this cycle even further.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
why we need to be very careful and find a really fine balance in here.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I know it's so interesting, isn't it? That thing. I do love. I mean, I feel the frustration with the whole weight management piece, but I also do find it reassuring when we think about our bodies in terms of its brilliance rather than that sense it's fighting against us. I think so often, particularly around weight, it feels like a battleground with yourself. And actually, if we understand the kind of protective piece, and like you say, it's natural and it's actually part of our body's response to very valid signals in its view, then that kind of helps us when we start thinking about what we might need to do, but also not beating ourselves up, which I think is a key thing that we really need to address this evening. So before we start talking about food choices, I wanted to touch a little bit on many of the sort of the rules that we've carried with us. We are women at this point in midlife, and I was posting about this on social media last week and I had an amazing response. But all of the strange diets that our generation, I think particularly, were gifted by the marketing teams, and a lot of that stays with us, you know. So what dieting rules do you feel that we almost need to step away from, or effectively are working against us in midlife? Which ones do you find yourself again and again having to challenge when you're working with clients?
I very much like to talk about this because I know that it's such a delicate and frustrating thing, weight. But then I think all the diets that we have learned and been, following it, yes, for so many years, we felt also a bit trapped in this idea that we need to do this type of dietings or have a certain type of approach. And what I like about things these days is that we do have research that is actually suggesting that they are counterproductive. And I think that's really reassuring, because on the other side of that spectrum, then you have something waiting for you, which can be having a balanced diet, having fun with food, enjoying food. That means pleasure, happiness, and that can be done. I know it sounds a little bit daunting and maybe not very realistic at this stage, but it's something that may take longer, that may require a little bit more of a holistic approach, but it is possible to get to a healthy weight and enjoy food. And I think that's beautiful.
Totally agree. What would you say that we should be stepping away from? I
Mm.
know before the session we were talking about some of the ones that can sometimes cause issues when you're having conversations with clients.
So the main thing I want to start with is the concept of calorie restriction. And that can help in the short term, but it usually backfires. We know now, as I said, there are studies now, enough studies to show that people usually regain their weight or gain even more in the long term. And this is because the body adapts by slowing the metabolism. So we are talking about restrictive diets. I don't really like to talk about calorie numbers, something to keep in mind. And you go below a certain threshold, and then the body goes into, again, a stress. It's like a red flag to the body, and the body just slows down metabolism to hold on to those to that energy that is not getting from food. Also, when we just focusing on calories, we're not really thinking much about the nutrients in our food. So we're likely to be malnourished if we are following those diets for a long term. Then those diets very likely will disrupt our hunger hormones. They will be a stress signal for the body, and they increase cortisol. So the trio that I talk about, the hunger hormones, the cortisol, and the insulin, will all be disrupted. And we're more likely to lose muscle mass. So again, less muscle mass, less chances to more difficulty in burning fat. And this can also lead to an unhealthy relationship with food, which, as I mentioned a while ago, I think eventually, ultimately, we all want to have a healthy relationship with food. So this is under the calorie restriction umbrella. So there are other things that are unhelpful. So the strict forms of fasting, I think we may touch on that a little bit later, but just as a flag now, there are sensible ways to fast, but if they are very strict, we go again into the calorie restriction risk, and all these sort of downsides, these potential risks that I just mentioned, will all happen as well with strict forms of fasting. Another one would be over-exercising. Over-exercising can signal stress to the body and is a way to increase cortisol. So again, cortisol means more chances to accumulate fat around the waist area in particular. I want to mention also the fear of fats and carbs. So that's another big one. I think that's
we're going to come and talk into more detail, aren't we? That's a really big one to unpick. And the other one we've talked about as well. And you know, we're obviously a very responsible community. We formulate supplements, but I get very cross when I see these supplements that promise to, well, there's one that that I will remain nameless, but they'll talk explicitly about, weight loss as a route, often using actually herbs that have wonderful functional capacity, but aren't there to do that. And that kind of silver bullet promise of a product in a pot that's you're going to somehow miraculously lose weight overnight through over-the-counter supplements makes me really cross, because it does a huge disservice actually to botanicals and the supplement space. And the other thing I was just going to add and reflect on here is this: I think the one thing I've noted through working with our coaches and multidisciplinary clinics, particularly in the US, is also there's so much to be said about the benefits of taking advice when it comes to protocols, particularly if you've got a lot of weight to lose. And there can be some great protocols out there where you can look at restriction as a very short-term motivator to get you on a path to that weight loss journey, but you really do need the support around you. And I think that for me, it really on all areas female health has increasingly become something I've realized there's a real power in community and support, because it has to be that whole body approach. And to your point, Vera, when you're doing like huge calorie restriction on your own, you're not necessarily thinking about the nutrients that are going into your body. You're not thinking about how you exercise. Quite often we compound it as well, don't we? So we are in the gym as well, trying to do the HIIT workout, because that we've been told that's the quickest way to get there. Really taking that, again, whole body and mind approach and expert support whenever you can, I think is absolutely key. And I just wanted to touch a little bit, I was talking there about the products in a pot, which I feel really uncomfortable with. There are, however, botanicals that can help, particularly when it comes to sort of digestion. So it's not so much here thinking explicitly about weight loss, but to your point around gut microbiota health and ways that we can manage blood sugar, what are the botanicals that you turn to that you think can be really helpful?
So when it comes to supplements, you said it already, and I think there aren't really any particular ingredients or supplements. The research is not there. It doesn't back up anything. And also what happens is that in some cases these ingredients are used in quite high doses, which can also make us question about safety, particularly if you take them long term. So I would be very careful when it comes to certain supplements. But when you look at supplementation in a sort of more comprehensive way, and now that I talked a little bit about gut health, about stress management, about blood sugar, this is where actually certain supplements, particularly botanicals, can make a difference. So this is our approach, and this is how I definitely in clinic approach weight management. So we're going to make sure that the digestive system is supported. So we will think about herbs like ginger, slippery elm as a prebiotic to support healthy bowel movements. We will be thinking about blood sugar balance. So cinnamon, again, is in our blends as well.
Yeah.
Then we want to cover also the stress management and supporting our adrenals. So here there is a very important class of herbs called adaptogens. I would be thinking of ashwagandha and bacopa, so amazing to support the stress response. And that's why we include these amazing herbs in our blends.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction, isn't it? And again, back to your point, I think that the other thing is we're so careful with the dosage levels. So there's a long-term safety consideration in everything that we do. And I think you're right. I think thinking about them more holistically is absolutely key when we're thinking about our health. And there's a lovely sort of reflection here, and we will come back to this one, Tasha, because it's a beautiful question just in the chat saying we've been socialized to think about weight aesthetically, and that's so true, isn't it? How should we understand what weight we should be from a health point of view? That's such an important thing, and that's absolutely the lens we're going to be talking about tonight, but really appreciate that. Thank you for the question. Moving on to a little bit more detail around food, I think the other thing that's become an increasing topic of discussion both in the UK and the US actually in the last couple of years is ultra processed foods. I wanted to pause on this a little bit because I know this is something that you're incredibly passionate about, Vera. And I also think that we are viewing this conversation as midlife women. We're often worrying about our partners. Maybe we've got children in the household. We're reviewing this information. But I think the thing that really struck me when I read all the research is ultra processed foods for females in midlife, particularly, are a real concern. And they're really disruptive in terms of weight, hormones, and appetite regulation. So can you talk to me a little bit about why that is? Because I think that just puts another layer on why it's something we should really be thinking about as we navigate menopause.
Yeah, nice introduction, Rebecca. Also, when you actually extended it beyond, obviously, our community, because it is upsetting. Is when we're talking about children in particular, there's a lot of UPFs, even in foods that are supposed to be healthy. So it's a topic that is very close to my heart for sure. So the bottom line is that at the end of the day, let's think of UPFs as a spectrum. There are different types of UPFs. There are some foods that are more processed than others. We're talking about ultra processed foods. That's what UPFs stand for. Usually they will have 5 or more ingredients, with some of them that you don't recognize the names. But it is not necessarily easy sometimes for people to recognize what UPF is. But in a way or another, I think this would be just a good starting point. Something that some foods that have a food that would have more than 5 ingredients that you cannot recognize at least one of them. They're not real foods, so they work against our biology, and they can impact as well on weight, even, and that's where it can get really confusing and frustrating, because even products, or very likely actually to be products that are advertised as low calories or low fat, no sugar, high protein, because now the protein topic is so big. There's a lot of marketing around that. So I'll touch on one of these labels just in a short while. But in general terms, what happens with UPFs is that because of the structure, the matrix that they have, they, as opposed to all foods, they basically are much easier to chew. You just don't even give yourself, your body, your brain, the time to start signaling important signaling processes where your hunger hormones will tell the brain, yes, I'm okay, I am full, I don't need more food. And this is a problem, because by delaying these hunger hormones, you are much more likely to continue eating. You feel hungry, you have those cravings, and you keep eating, you keep eating. It takes much longer for your brain to just say, enough, I'm full, because you're lacking all that,
all those signals.
The signals, yes. And so they can easily spike insulin. So again, going back to fat storage, there is plenty of research showing that they disrupt gut health. They raise inflammation, so cortisol is also part of the equation. And then also when you have a diet that is quite high in those, we are actually reducing the intake of all foods, because they're taking the place of eating real food, and so we're more likely to have nutritional deficiencies, and so the body slows down the metabolism. And as I said, we need to be particularly aware of the ones that are advertised as no sugar or high protein, low fat. So the no sugar is one that I find a little bit cheeky, because usually no sugar means artificial sweeteners. So that's something says no sugar, you can be 98% sure that it has artificial sweeteners. For instance, yogurts, very, very typical, particularly the ones that are flavored. So then they will have artificial sweeteners. And then certain healthy drinks, kombucha, that I often find in the supermarket, will say no added sugar, and it will have artificial sweeteners. And so these artificial sweeteners are one of the ingredients you can find in ultra-processed foods that can be quite disruptive. So they will impact on our health in many ways, like I just described, from our gut health to disrupting our insulin sensitivity. But they do something interesting as well, because they are a sweet taste that is a calorie empty. It can confuse the brain. So the brain has this taste of sugar, of sweetness, something sweet, and it keeps looking for real sugar satisfaction. So this creates food noise.
Interesting.
Yeah. And interesting, some studies also show that they can spike blood sugar. So some artificial sweeteners can also spike blood sugar. So it's not just this is what was one argument to actually avoid adding certain forms of sweeteners, like honey as an example. So the artificial sweeteners became so popular, but there is research also showing that some of them can also impact on our blood sugar regulation. So
really interesting. It brings me on to my next question, actually, which you just touched on there. That sense of food noise. And in the inbound questions we had with regards to tonight, there's so many of us struggling with cravings, with not feeling full or satisfied. Maybe food is something that we turn to when we're stressed, and we feel stressed because we're in this life stage, but also life is stressful for many of us at this life stage too. So why does food noise increase for us during menopause, and what is happening to those sort of hunger signals and those signals of feeling full and satisfied from food?
So that estrogen drop also affects hormones, hunger hormones. So say GLP-1, it reduces the signaling of GLP-1, also affects other hunger hormones like leptin and ghrelin. So there is this dysregulation that is directly happening because of the estrogen change. And then estrogen also affects blood sugar directly. So we are more likely to, when we eat something, to have less efficient blood sugar control, which then means that we are more likely to have cravings.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a direct link. And then there is also, as I mentioned before, our reduced resilience to stress
Mm-hmm.
impacts on cortisol, and we are more likely to have issues with sleep. So that stress and sleep connection is also there. That also impacts on our hunger hormones then. So the sleep and hunger hormones, it's another very strong link. When we're not sleeping well and when our sleep is disrupted, then our hunger hormones can also be impacted. So that exacerbates or contributes to that potential food noise that we will have at this life stage. So
That's
as
really interesting. So again, it's that sort of the mismessaging that happens in our body as a result of this kind of biochemical shift is making us feel more hungry. It's making us feel less satisfied when we eat. And so the next sort of obvious question, which I'm sure you were going to go to, is how can food choices help restore that and also calm food noise? Because really tonight we want to get into the solutions and tips that you advise your clients with from a lifestyle medicine and nutritional perspective. And I think you touched on earlier the danger sometimes of reaching for these ultra processed foods, which we might think, I'm really craving something sweet, I'll go and have that high protein yogurt that's got strawberries and chocolate flakes on the top of it and it's only 97 calories. I'll go and have that, which is obviously we just discussed, absolutely not the thing that we should be doing. So what do you recommend as a practitioner if we're sitting here and we're thinking, I get to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the food noise is absolutely overwhelming, I'm trying really hard to be good? What would you recommend that we start doing, and how can that actually help over the long term just rewire so that those food noise signals are much easier for us to deal with?
So there's plenty we can do, and I think that's why this is exciting and the conversation gets, that's why this is a fair and honest conversation, because we genuinely can share helpful advice, I think. So because we were on the ultra processed foods topic, I just want to touch on that and say that they are disruptive for the food noise for sure. But this is all about putting things into context and allowing some flexibility. So I like to talk about those ultra processed foods here in terms of limiting them. We don't have to be really obsessed with avoiding them completely, because that adds extra stress, which we don't need at this life stage. So the 80-20 rule is quite good, meaning if you try to follow a diet that is 80% of all foods and 20% potentially ultra processed foods, that's fine, because those 80%, that 80% is going to nourish your hormones, is going to balance your appetite, and then 20% is just allowing for some
just life.
Sanity, yes. That's
Yeah.
it. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Then the really big core of it, in my opinion and my clinical experience and the research, so I just kind of layer it like this because I just cannot emphasize and highlight how important it is how we structure our meals. So obviously in terms of content, but also in terms of timing, how we eat, not just what we eat, but how we eat. So one first step is to make sure we have an adequate intake of protein. And I know we've been talking a lot about protein and is everywhere. And in fact, I think now it's probably going even the other way, isn't it, Rebekah? Maybe people are just thinking they have to eat.
They're overwhelmed. There's a lot of protein that we have to
More
eat.
than they
Yes.
actually need. So we're talking about a sensible, moderate amount of protein. And the recent guidelines, very recent actually, they state that for women in menopause, we're talking about 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of weight. That's a sensible amount. And if you want to be a little bit more flexible, because I really don't like to stick to numbers to that level, we may be thinking about from 25 to 40 grams of protein per meal. This is sensible, and this is important. This is needed. We need that protein in midlife, not just in the context of helping with weight, but in so many other areas. So that protein is really important. It stimulates hormones like GLP-1, helping you to feel full for longer. The next thing is that we need to think about our meals in a way that brings regularity, consistency. So we need to think about having 3 main meals a day. So your breakfast, your lunch, and your dinner, without skipping meals consistently. And this is what can really help with reducing that food noise, helping those hunger hormones, those stress hormones, that insulin to be like signaling in a happy way and stable. And so as part of that structure of having 3 main meals a day, we talked about protein. And then we want to think about those meals with the right balance. So having protein, having healthy fats, fiber, and carbs. So yes, carbs. And with the carbs is a really interesting one. And again, there is research to back that up. We should not necessarily eliminate them, but we should aim to have a moderate amount of carbs paired with protein and fat. In fact, they actually help us in many ways, from energy, but also to keep those hunger hormones and those stress signals low when we have a minimum of carbs, let's say. If we go too low, then the body again goes into a stress mode, and that becomes counterproductive. In addition, carbs are really important as a source of fiber. So think gut health, think again, fiber is another a signal for GLP release. So many important aspects for carbs as well when taken in moderation, and the right type of carbs as well. We're talking about complex carbs. So these are really important things, and I would start with that. This is what I call a strategically structured meal plan. This combination of protein, good fats, fiber, and moderate carbs, and having your 3 main meals a day. So that consistency.
And I think what you're saying here as well, just to play it back to you, is that kind of consistency piece will actually then start, because we're feeling satiated, because our hormones are being encouraged to work in the way that they should, the food noise will diminish a little bit anyway, because we're starting to send the right signals out to our body to know when it's full and feel full. So we're not having that sort of internal battle. But can you talk to me a little bit about if we do still feel the food noise? Because I think that's the other thing about this evening, about being realistic as well, about as we're transitioning into being more consistent, are there things we can be doing that are better for us to reach for? Like if you got to that 4 o'clock slump, Vera, what would your recommendation be? What do you turn to in your cupboard? And how can that actually enhance, again, our biochemistry? Because again, we've spoken about this a lot because it's such a common question within our community. Your response to me previously has been, you can choose snacks that actually, again, help get our bodies back into balance. So what would they be, for example?
Yeah, so you're always thinking protein. I like
Right.
think of protein as an anchor. So it needs to be there. That's the anchor for every meal. That's why we need to always think protein from the start for breakfast until, and when we talk about the total amount of protein, we should think about that it should be divided throughout the day, because this is how
Right.
it actually contributes in a way that promotes these healthy blood sugar levels and hormone regulation, like I said. So I'm just saying this because sometimes
For front load with it. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I've done it. I've done my protein. Yeah.
or I have seen a lot in clinic when people they do some sort of fasting where they just start eating maybe at 1 p.m.
Hmm.
and then they say, yes, but then in the evening I have a very nice meal and I've got lots of protein there. But that's not the same. The body has been in
Right.
a stress mode for half of the day. That protein needs to be there for every meal. This is what the research shows. So
Mm.
when we think about snacking, just as a flag, one may say, and there is sort of like a body of research also showing that avoid snacking, at least, maybe one snack a day, you may still get away, but that concept of keep snacking, that is really counterproductive for weight. And then
Mm.
something to keep in mind, that obviously we're
Mm.
talking a lot about nourishment here, not being restrictive, but that's something to keep in mind. But the good news is that if you actually have this protocol in place where you eat 3 times a day with this right balance of macronutrients, you're more than likely to feel the need to snack. And it
Mm.
may not happen straight away, but if you continue and you are consistent with this pattern, that will actually settle. So if we need to snack, we will think protein. So you may think of having a full-fat Greek yogurt with some nuts and some berries. So that's a really nice combination. You've got your protein, you've got your good fats there, you've got fiber, and all these will help your hunger hormones. And then another option you consider would be a slice of sourdough bread with peanut butter. So again, you have your protein, your good fats, your fiber there, a moderate amount of carbs. What we were talking about as well, Rebekah, which is interesting, if you start with these foods, they do help you and just settle your hunger. But sometimes,
Mm.
whatever reason, the day has been hard, you may just really want to hit that biscuit. And that's okay as well. And then if you do that, I think if you keep that awareness, like This biscuit is going to be just sugar going to my bloodstream. Probably my body's not going to be that happy. There's going to be like a roller coaster of sugar going on there. What can I do to help? That protein. Okay, so you go back to that and you think, have a few nuts alongside, or maybe just a pot of yogurt, because that's going to help that biscuit to minimize the impact that it may have in the body. It's an option. And
I have to say, this really helped me. So for people that sort of skeptical, I was skeptical when Dr. Martin said this to me, because it's like, but that's more calories. But actually what it's done is meant that if I do want that thing, I want that thing, but I have the protein alongside it. And actually, then I don't want as many of those things. I don't want the whole packet of biscuits. And I don't go on that kind of, like you say, that blood sugar roller coaster, because it's been rooted in the protein. And actually, over time, you then want the protein. It's really interesting. You want that because it does genuinely, it fills you up in a way that those other things that you reach for because you're depleted and your body says, I need sugar, I need sugar. Actually, what it's really needing is the protein piece. So, yeah.
And those good fats, they just
yes.
anchoring the reducing that food noise.
Yeah, really helpful. And actually in the PDF that we're going to be sharing with all of you following this evening, Vera's put together some really lovely swaps. So certain foods that we often reach for, are there other sort of healthier swaps that we can very easily integrate into our everyday that can just help us stay on that nourished journey? But that's really helpful. Thanks, Vera. And it kind of brings me on to my next question, which was actually about fasting. And I know that there's a lot of, I mean, fasting as a word can be used in so many different ways. You've just described the sort of trying to avoid snacking, because in a way doing that effectively as a microfast between each meals, and it's a much better way to allow our bodies to digest and stay balanced. But can you talk to us a little bit about fasting? And I was also curious because there was some interesting research around when fasting can be helpful for women. So let's talk about the overnight piece, but also the danger of aggressive fasting, and then also the earlier insights around the potential circadian fasting, which is a topic that is all over Instagram at the moment.
Yeah, so the fasting is a really interesting one. I think it sounds confusing. It sounds like there's a lot of information out there, but I see it in a quite simple way. Maybe I oversimplified, but actually I think this is where the research is more consistent, is then there we have enough evidence, scientific evidence, to know that a sensible, let's say, eating window from 10 hours for sure, 12 hours maybe, but definitely, let's say 10 hours eating window, which would mean 14 hours. It's enough. And that has been shown to improve heart health, metabolic health. So in the context of heart health, cardiovascular health, we know that it can improve blood pressure, cholesterol, reducing inflammation. So this is a sensible kind of fasting. Mm-hmm. Some people may even, because we are all different and people deal with calories in different ways. Some people may do actually 12 hours. So 12 mm-hmm. hours eating, 12 hours fasting, and that can be helpful. I think the main thing to remember is trying, and when talking about the circadian aspect of it, again, not shifting or eating too late. And actually, it will be quite difficult if you have a very strict fasting window to fit 3 meals. So you would go against the principles I endorsing here. If you have a very strict window, and you're very likely to be also reducing your amount of calories and just going into that potentially that risk of, like I said, of upsetting your hunger hormones and your stress hormones. So it is, there are sensible ways to do it. So you stick to this eating window, you fit your 3 main meals there, and then where you can and should be, let's say, stricter, is to avoid eating at nighttime. So that's when your metabolism is then slower, and that can be more problematic in terms of weight gain and managing your weight. So you could set then a rule to stop eating from 7 or 8 p.m. You can eat, you should have water, herbal teas without anything added to it, but this is a sensible way to do it.
I think that's really interesting. And the stuff I've been reading, and again, Dr. Stacey Sims has been putting out quite a lot about this recently, if you haven't come across it as a discussion topic for those listening this evening. But I think also that piece about recognizing our cortisol surge in the morning as women in midlife, and the challenge that sometimes brings because it is less regulated and it's a higher surge and it doesn't deplete in the way that we'd want it to normally. It's not that gentle decrease that we should see. It means that if we ensure we have breakfast, that can really help with that cortisol surge. And so that whole thing of waiting can be quite problematic, and actually brings me on to the next question, really, where we don't really want to talk about banning anything. As Dr. Martin's highlighted, even when it comes to UPFs, we should be thinking about moderation and consistency. But one of the things I know that you, again, taught me to do quite early on in my midlife journey was to not have that cup of black coffee on an empty stomach, which is what my breakfast used to be. So can you talk to us a little bit now about what we should do less of, even if it feels healthy or virtuous? Because again, with black coffee, I was brought up to believe it was the best way to take coffee. It's obviously calorie free. It gave me the energy I thought I needed. It actually probably blunted my hunger, which is why I used to do it. And yet what I wasn't aware of was the impact that was having on my hormones. And actually by deferring my hunger, I was actually causing myself more difficulty later on the day. So what do you advocate that we do less of, Vera, in terms of habits that we might think are healthy, or just things that we're probably doing that we've inherited from literature or advice that's now out of date?
Yeah, so starting with not having coffee on an empty stomach is a good advice, Rebecca.
Mm.
That's something that I advocate so much. So having coffee on an empty stomach, particularly if women are not even having breakfast, so that's something I see sometimes. It's literally, again, sending your body into a stress zone.
Mm.
So that spikes your insulin and your cortisol, and again, very counterproductive for weight, again, particularly around the waist area. And then that message first thing in the morning can be very counterproductive as well in terms of how your hunger hormones will behave, your food choices, your energy levels, your brain function, how alert you will be. I know that you get that kick from the coffee, but that will
Mm.
come with a price, because also that becomes like a vicious cycle. And then, as you said, sometimes people are tricked into thinking that because they had that coffee and that keeps them going, they don't need the food, they are not hungry anymore. And that can be risky because it makes it less likely for you to look for a healthy, balanced breakfast, where again, you have your protein, you have your
Mm.
healthy fats, and this is where you get the real nutrition and the real energy coming from that is sustainable
Mm.
and that helps your hormones. So this is a big one. And I've seen a lot of women feeling better, obviously weight is not something that shifts so quickly, but literally experiencing the benefits of that on the spot, just feeling more energy, feeling less cravings later in the day, all the good things, better clarity, you name it. So I think that's a really important
Mm.
one. And then a lot of the things that we touched already, but avoid low calorie dieting, strict fasting, skipping meals. So this is all the things we, let's say, should avoid. And excessive high intense exercise, the UPFs again, and to not avoid your carbs and your fats. So just
Mm.
be friends with them, because they have a really important role in this, nice plate that I keep talking about.
And we're gonna touch on one of these nice plates in a minute. Before I do, I just want to flag that we've got only a few minutes left. Are there questions in the chat that you would like Vera to respond to, even if we don't have time this evening? Please do pop them in, because we'll make sure they're part of the show notes, along with all of the kind of practical tips that we're going to be sending you as a result of this evening. But we obviously want to come on at the end, Vera, to talk about what we should actually be doing. In a way, we've talked that all through the regular meals, that prioritization of protein, fiber, healthy fats, that sleep and stress regulation. And there's so much about mindful eating as well as the lifestyle interventions that can help with stress. But before we do that, I just wanted to take one of the meals, because I think we talk a lot about this PFF protocol, which is protein, good fats, and fiber. But can we just take dinner as an example? You've given us some recipes that will be circulating, just to make it really clear as to how you can make your plate up. And actually, this is also reflective of your metabolic health. So I think the thing to flag is we're not advocating here calorie restriction, but there is a recognition that we need less of those calories at this point in our life. Would that be fair? And it's where they come from, Vera, that is key in that kind of portion control piece. Can you
Mhm.
talk to me about the dinner that you've described in the leave behind that we're going to be sending to people? Because you've given me a delicious recipe here, and without wanting to spoil the excitement of the document you're going to receive in a few days from us, it's a sort of vegetarian feta frittata with green beans on the side, and it actually feels really indulgent. You've got feta cheese crumbled, about 60 grams of that. You've got spinach, so a cup of spinach, some peppers, some spring onions, some sweet potatoes. So you've got that good carb in there as well. Extra virgin olive oil as well, which is your good fat. And
Yeah.
then you've got green beans, and it's a good size. I've made this evening. It's 100 grams of green beans. You've got the garlic in there, walnuts, sesame seeds. Again, you season that green bean dish with extra virgin olive oil with a little bit of lemon juice. And that's giving me 30 grams of protein overall, and we'll break that down, but it's giving me 14 grams of fiber, and it's giving me about 29 grams of carbs. And can you talk to me about why you structure it like that? What am I getting from the eggs, the sesame seeds, the walnuts, the feta cheese that actually help us from a health benefit point of view? So I think that's the thing that we need to start understanding is I'm choosing these foods for a reason, and it's obviously about the delivery of protein and fiber and good carbs, but what else do we get when we take something like that as a dish?
Yeah, so I selected these on purpose in terms of the fact that it contains eggs. And I mean, you will see that there isn't a recipe there that is just plant-based, although there is nothing wrong with that. And you see that some of my recommendations you can replace plant-based, but I just wanted to honor some foods that are actually very menopause friendly. And eggs is one of them. Also because they are so versatile, you can have them for breakfast, and you actually should if you enjoy them, and you can some days of the week, and you can have them really at any time of the day. But the thing with eggs is that they are a complete source of protein, including has one type of amino acid called leucine, which is actually really important to support muscle formation. So to build muscle, which is something that it's part of the conversation a lot as well in menopause, because we're more likely to lose muscle mass. And if that happens, then again, that can revert. So we feedback into us having even more difficulty in losing weight because that muscle helps. So that is a really important aspect. So foods that are high in leucine, and actually vegan diets can be risky in that sense. So you have to pay a bit more attention and combine different types of plant-based sources to have that leucine up. So the eggs are very good because they make that easier for you. And they are very good source of choline as well. So choline is a really good ingredient. It's a very menopause-friendly nutrient as well. And choline helps with fat metabolism, it helps with brain health. So again, foods high in choline are top of the list. Again, more difficult to have in a vegan diet. Then this is packed also with healthy fats. You can see here, where do I have? So you have your walnuts, your sesame seeds, your extra virgin olive oil. Feta cheese, interesting, also contains unsaturated fats. It's one of the type of cheeses that is healthier in that way and also brings more protein, and it brings that calcium that is also quite important at this life stage for our bone health. So compared to what we would have at lunch, there is slightly less carbohydrates load, because keeping in mind that we should have a lower glycemic load at nighttime. So you get your carbs here mainly from obviously all the vegetables who contribute to it, but then you have your sweet potato. And I chosen sweet potato on purpose. You can use a white potato, but it will release sugar in the bloodstream in a sort of slower way. It's a low glycemic index food. So when we're talking about carbs, so keeping that in mind is important. What kind of carbs to use? So the ones that have that low GI are preferable for healthier insulin response. So we have a nice blend of soluble and insoluble fiber from several different vegetables. So you have your sweet potatoes, your spinach, and then you have green beans as a side. So this is really important. We didn't touch on it in depth, but there are different types of fiber. So the soluble fiber is the one that can help feed good bacteria in the gut. Insoluble fiber is very helpful to improve stool bulk and help with constipation. So something that women can be more at risk during menopause. But overall, fiber will be really important as a sort of a gut health boost. So we have plenty of fiber here, and it also sends the right signals for our hunger hormone and stress hormones to be in a happy place. Because it's at nighttime, I also included things that contain tryptophan, so spinach, the eggs. Magnesium is also high in the list, helps with the relaxing our muscles and our nervous system. So spinach is also high in magnesium. I think you may see in my recipes, I use extra virgin olive oil and garlic in all of them during the day, like for your lunch and dinner, and the extra virgin olive oil. You know, extra virgin olive oil is on the top of the list as one of the most healthiest types of healthy fats, and it's big in the Mediterranean diet, so loads of research to go with it. I would advocate extra virgin olive oil as the top healthy fat. And then garlic is just, you know, garlic is actually a prebiotic. It helps with feeding good bacteria in the gut, and it's just amazing as an antimicrobial, just also again keeping your gut health and your gut bacterium happy and your immune system as well. Just something, if you have regularly, your health will thank you overall. So it's a good one, garlic.
Thank you. And I think, I mean, it gives you a hint of what's going to be coming your way over the next 48 hours is that I found this really useful, not looking just at what types of food, you know, I kind of get that I should be having protein, I kind of get, but I think what Vera's done here for us is create recipes where all of those ingredients are doing so much more probably than we realize. And once we start learning about that, that can really be a route through to nourishment and weight management. There's one tiny question here, Lisa. I'm going to try and squeeze it in and then we'll have to wrap up for the evening. And so if there's any other questions, please email us. But Lisa asked quite rightly, because there's a lot of vegans in our community. You spoke there, Vera, about eggs and how useful they can be because of this pure protein source and also the other attributes. If we are vegan and we're looking to find those sources elsewhere, where would your go-to be? What kind of ingredients would you be putting on the plate for the vegan dinner?
Yeah, so the vegan dinner, and I have in one of my recipes, which
Mm,
actually contains salmon. That was lunch. It
mm,
can be replaced by tofu
mhm.
or tempeh. So I think that's what she asks here.
Lisa's actually asking, yeah, Lisa already
Um,
as a seasoned vegan, you're right.
definitely, that's fine. I think, again, you just should keep in mind, I think you can have a very healthy plant-based diet, but it just needs more planning. The main risks are the protein, not just the amounts, but also the protein quality. Because
Mm,
just as an example, I touched on this amino acid that is important for muscle. And then also some sources of protein in, let's say, beans, or they may not have the complete amino acid profile. So then the right way to do it is to pair like a pulse with a grain. For instance, a good one would be lentils with brown rice.
mm.
So then you get that combination. So there's a few more things to keep in mind. Um, and yeah, so that can require a little bit more planning when it comes to the protein.
And I think that's the beauty again of Mother Nature is it's often the pairing of plants, and that comes through in the botanicals you do as well, that allows you to still get to that same profile, but it just, like you say, takes a little bit more thinking perhaps, or just, I think once you become a vegan, I was vegan for a long time, it does become second nature, but it's just knowing where to go and find the stuff, isn't it? And then getting into the routine of things. Thank you so much, Vera. Thank you to everyone that's joined tonight. I know it's been a sort of a packed evening and there's so much more we want to tell you. So as I say, there'll be 2 documents coming to you along with this recording following this evening. There'll be Vera's recipes with a sort of an understanding of why she's chosen foods beyond that kind of protein, fiber, fat piece. We're going to be really digging into sort of almost like superstar ingredients for us in midlife and how they can support weight management. We're also going to be supplying you a booklet that talks to the swap outs that we found really useful as a community. Again, has the science behind them. So when we're thinking about weight maintenance, we're doing it through that view of nourishment. And back to that earlier question around looking at weight from a health perspective rather than just an aesthetic perspective, that's absolutely what that document hopefully will help with. And it's finding nourishing routes that leave you feeling satiated and happy and enjoying your food whilst also managing your weight. So that document will be coming your way too. And then as always, there is our health concierge team, which is healthconcierge@mpowder.store. You can email us at any point with questions and we will always get back to you. And Dr. Martins is obviously part of the crew. So if the questions are triaged up to her, you'll get a direct response from Dr. Martins as well. But Vera, thank you so much. I know we only really scratched the surface this evening. It's a topic I think we could have about 4 masterclasses on, and maybe we should.
I
So
think
if that is a question or a request from any of you, please let us know as well by emailing the health concierge team, and we can get to that as well, because it's something I think that's, as we learn more, we're going to want to return to it more and more as well. But thank you as always. Thank you to everyone who turned up live. It's always such a joy to see you here live, as well as everyone I know is going to be catching up on the video recording. And Vera, thank you as always for your wisdom. It's been a phenomenal evening.
thank you, everyone.
Have a good night all.